All right. We've got about 16 folks in the room here, a great crowd. And we're joined by our special guest, Liane, who I will introduce in a moment here. A few more people trickling in. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room just so we're efficient here with time. But welcome, everyone. Hi, I've met many of you, not all of you. I'm Madeline Larson, one of the co-founders of Practice Vital. Great to see you all today. Happy New Year to everyone who's, back in the grind of things, 2026. We thought this would be a fabulous conversation to kick off the year. We're joined today with Liane Wood, who many of you may know or have worked with in the past, or have perhaps just seen through the industry community. She's a tremendous thought leader in the mental health space, has built a community around her Build Your Private Practice brand and business. And she's a tremendous business leader as well in helping practice leaders like yourselves grow, groom, optimize their practices and their help for your own client communities. So I'm excited to hear from Liane, especially as I said, the timing of kicking off the new year with some new habits, some new goals, some new strategies as you plan the year ahead. And what better perspective than Liane's to share with us today? I'll hand it over to Liane, who is able to screen share as you wish, and I'll keep a close eye on chat, Liane, in case conversation spurs any questions, and we can either find moments to break or save those for the end, depending on what your preference is.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
I've just dropped a workbook for today's webinar in the chat there. So Madeline, what I've noticed is that when people join after something has been put in the chat, they can't see the previous chat. So if you
Ooh,
don't mind grabbing that so that if people are trickling in later that you can maybe reshare it for me so that everybody has access to it, that would be so
absolutely.
helpful. Thank you.
Great.
And I'm just going to set up my screen share here and hopefully, oh, I just need to adjust it just a little bit, I think. There we go.
Perfect.
Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, lovely.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so grateful to all of you who have chosen to spend this time with me here today. I will start this off by saying that I usually do this webinar as in a 2-hour format. And so I am anticipating that you will have a little bit of homework after we're done this, as some of it, we're going to be really diving into specifically for your practice, your goals and your plans. And so I would just encourage you as we go through this to just in the workbook, just maybe make a note where you might need to go back and spend a few more minutes to finish things off, because I do want to respect all of your time that you've made today to be here for this. So we are going to be going through annual planning and strategy here. So just a little bit about me before we dive in. Madeline's done a lovely job of introducing me. I am the Chief Empowering Officer of Build Your Private Practice. I'm also a registered psychotherapist with a group practice in Ontario. And I just have such a passion for the intersection of mental health and business. Before I was a psychotherapist, I was in the insurance world for over 25 years. I owned 3 different insurance brokerages. My last one I built from ground zero to over 7 figures before selling it to go back to school to become a therapist. And so there's a lot of business in my background, and I thought I left that to be more people-centered and as a therapist. And what I discovered going into private practice is that I needed that business background. And so I'm excited to be able to share that with the therapists that I work with and with all of you today here. So we're going to start by reviewing a little bit of your past in the past year. So because I found that that actually helps us in moving forward as we look at the next year. Okay. And so what you'll need if that annual planning workbook that I've dropped in the chat there, and then it may be helpful. It depends, how you best work, right? You may need some blank paper or notebook, or maybe just an open Word doc on your computer where you can do a little bit of a brain dump as we're going through things here today, okay? Just so that you are aware. And I'm just going to open my chat so that I can see a little bit, but I'm going to pop it over to the side so that it's hopefully not in the screen share as well. Okay. Here we go. So I want to start by, really thinking about the last 90 days. So Q4 of 2025. And I'd love it right now if you just took a moment or two to really think about everything that you accomplished in Q4 in your practice. Um, everything that you did that was kind of on your goals list or that list of like, I need to get this done, and write it down. I think, it's often that we have these to-do lists, but I don't think we keep a to-done list. Like I actually got it done. And so I want to start just by thinking about that last quarter of 2025. Write out everything that you accomplished and think about, after you get the list, I want you to think about how you did it. How did you get those things done? And then also be thinking, this is on page 2 in your workbook. Sorry, I should have started there. But then also, really looking at, what are the 3 biggest accomplishments that you did in your practice in the last 90 days? So I'm just going to give you a moment to, start that list, write it out, everything that you did in the last 90 days, how you did it, and then identify your top 3 or your biggest 3. And so you may not be done this, but I want to keep us going, because there's so much more here. So I want you now on page 3 of the workbook to use that space to reflect on what you accomplished over the last year in 2025. So going deeper than just the last 90 days, I want you to think about the whole year. Think about what you accomplished and how you did it. It's really important. And so I hope that you're not skipping over this. I just want, to take a minute to think about those big things that you accomplished last year, how you did it, and write those down on page 3 in your workbook. I know I'm not giving you a whole lot of time on this. And so you may need to come back to this. But, really the purpose of all of this is, the space on page 4 of your workbook, right? Identifying your biggest accomplishments from the last quarter and the last year. Choosing the accomplishments, that really helped you move the most towards your long-term goals for your practice, or the ones that had the biggest or most significant impact. And then I want you to look at what you wrote in the how you did it column beside that accomplishment. And maybe think about, is there a common thread if you've got more than one, right? So, like to look at, what did you do? What were you able to do that led you to accomplishing those really big goals? And if there's anyone that wants to just pop in the chat and just type out the how you did it, doesn't necessarily have to be what you did, but how did you do it? because this is the big piece that we're going to be using going forward. And I love it when things are interactive so that we've got a little bit of back and forth going. So whoever feels comfortable when you have it figured out, just pop in the chat how you accomplished whatever it was that you did. Mm, that's amazing, Blanca. Bianca? Yeah, Bianca. Okay. Sharing your intention goals and having accountability partners and supports. Right? Yeah. So that accountability, speaking it out loud sometimes too, right? Speaking it out loud, having somebody to be accountable to, staying focused. Self space is saying, staying focused on the big picture. Yes. Right. And delegating tasks that get me into the weeds. So important, right? To not get lost in the weeds and then miss what the big picture is. These are great. I love this. Yeah. Using painters for marketing practice vital. Okay, amazing, Samantha. Yeah. And then Peggy says using data to create space from the emotions of decisions that need to be made. Yes, amazing. Yep. Samantha says partners. Grace Counseling says strategic planning sessions and masterminding with other CEOs, right? So again, I'm seeing that, that kind of that collaboration, accountability piece coming in. These are all so good. Thank you so much for sharing these. They're really important, and I want you to kind of hang on to these as we continue on here because how you did this is going to become really important in a few minutes when we start talking about the future. Okay? So we're going to shift gears here a little bit. We've been talking about last quarter, last year, and now we're going to talk for a few minutes about your 3-year vision for your practice. And so I want to invite you, if you're comfortable right now, to close your eyes or soften your gaze to find something. If you're softening your gaze, just find something gently to look at. And as we start thinking about your 3-year vision, I want to invite you to take a really deep breath in through your nose and then slowly release it by exhaling through your mouth. And I'm going to invite you to do that 2 more times, in through your nose and then out through your mouth. 1 more time. And I want to invite you to imagine a point in time 3 years from today, January the 8th, 2029. And tap into your vision and imagination skills to picture things like where you'd like to be living, whether that's where you are right now or somewhere different. To think about your surroundings and what you'd like to have around you. Think about what your lifestyle will be like in 3 years, how you like to spend your time, what hobbies you'll enjoy. And then next, I want to invite you to imagine the days of the week that you work, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 days. Picture how many weeks of vacation you're going to take per year. Is it 4 weeks vacation, 6 weeks, 8? And then also where you want to travel on those vacations. Picture who you want to spend time with in your life. People who are in your life now, and or maybe people you imagine will be in your life in 3 years' time. A partner, children, family members, friends, colleagues? Who will you be spending time with? And now I want you to picture your work. What services will you be offering? Who do you serve? And how many people will you have on your team? And what are their roles? Do you have admin support, maybe some marketing support, associates, partners, maybe a tech person, receptionist? Think about all of the positions that you'd love to have filled in your practice in 3 years' time. And start to really picture how you spend your time. What are you doing on the days you're working? Are you seeing clients? Are you running groups or workshops? Maybe you're managing associates or offering clinical supervision. What are the other aspects of your practice that you'd like to be involved in? What would feel really great to you? Right? So imagine in as much detail as you can all of the aspects of your practice 3 years from now. And picture yourself trying it on right now as if it's already happening. Try to imagine what it feels like to have that practice. Does it feel exciting, happy, fulfilling, maybe a bit overwhelming? See if you can tap into your body and the feeling of what you imagine it'll feel like when your practice is like what you're imagining right now. And then when you're ready, I want to invite you to open your eyes and turn to page 5 in your workbook where it's titled Your 3 Year Vision. And just take a moment to, because we don't have time to write it all out right now, but like write the main bullet points of that vision. And then, afterwards, you can go back and put in all of the detail. Okay, we're going to keep going here. So I just had you fast forward 3 years from now. And so I want to pull you back now into the present moment. And going back into your workbook, but keeping that 3 year vision close at hand. And on page 6 of the workbook, we're now going to look at this year's plan, 2026, and specifically that very first column on the left. And I want you to start writing down where you are today. So, just a high level overview, what your practice looks like right now. So, this could include anything relevant to you. So, it might be, your financials, like your revenue or your profit, or how many clients you have in your practice. Maybe the types of services you offer, maybe revenue breakdown between those services if you have more than one. how many team members you have right now, if there's more than just you, and what their roles are, and any other types of support that you have in your practice. Maybe also, write down how many days a week or how many hours a day that you work in your practice, what your schedule's like. You could also write down how many weeks of vacation you take. Maybe things about your boundaries or your policies and procedures, right? How do you spend your time when you're working in your practice versus on your practice? And do you have dedicated time to work on your practice development? And really anything else that you feel is relevant and specific to your practice. I know there's a lot to write down about your practice and where you are right now. So you may need to come back to this. And it's okay if you're not quite finished, right? But you can keep going while I'm talking about the next column. So I want to look now at the second column, and that one's titled, Where Do You Want to Be? Now, specifically, this is 12 months from right now. So, like the end of 2026. So, thinking of like December 31st, 2026, where do you want to be? And what I recommend doing is consider what you wrote for your 3-year vision and consider where you are now. And what you want to do is you want to move the needle forward about 1/3 because we did a 3-year vision, right? So what makes sense is knowing where you are today, where you want to be in 3 years from now, right? So, what makes sense for you to accomplish in the next 12 months so that you will be on track for that 3-year vision, right? So, the way that I would typically do this is, whatever you've written in that left-hand column for where you are now, I would write the equivalent in where you want to be column. So if my first point in the where you are now column is that I have 3 associates in my practice right now, and then my first point, where I want to be is that I want to have 12 associates in my practice, or sorry, maybe we'll do 6 associates in my practice 12 months from now, right? Then I would carry, and I'm going to carry that down, right? So I would say I have 3 right now. I want to have 6 in my practice 12 months from now, right? So you want the points that you have in the first column to start sort of lining up with the second column. I have 3 associates now. I want to have 6 in 12 months. This is my revenue now. This is what I want my revenue to be in 12 months. Hopefully that is making sense to you. If you have questions as we're going along, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Now, I know that this is likely not enough time for you to have this all completed, but that's why I'm suggesting that you find some time after today's webinar to come back to this and really flesh it out because the more detail that you have in your plan, the easier it is for you to take it from idea to being implemented. And so I'm going to move on to the third column and just know that you can come back to this at any time to continue filling in anything that is still left as a blank. So the third column here can be a little bit more challenging because it's not quite as straightforward as just listing where you are and where you want to be. So I want to encourage you to think back to that first exercise that we did around how you accomplished the things that you've done over the last quarter and the past year. Right? This is where, we look at, how was I most successful? How did I get those things done? Right? That's where this is that third column is where you are going to write down how you're going to do these goals that you're setting for yourself for 2026, right? So, for example, someone earlier said, I spoke it out loud, I had some accountability, right? Someone else was saying, I used data, I stayed focused on the big picture, and I delegated the tasks, right? So, now what I want you to do in that third column is look at what you're wanting to do in 2026 and coming up with how you're going to do it. Right. So, for example, if where you are right now is you have 4 associates in your practice, and a year from now you want to have 8 associates, how you get there is going to be fairly straightforward. You need to hire 4 associates, right? Some of them are going to be super simple like that. I need to hire some people, and you know where they want to be, where like what positions, what on your team, but they may not all be that straightforward. Okay. So you may actually need to, some of how you're going to get this done. It might be, I need to block some time off in my schedule to get this done. Another thought is, you could be setting aside time to document processes or create a system. It could be, how I'm going to get there. I'm going to scale back on my one-to-one clients to create more time. Not always, but often, how we're going to get there has something to do with hiring, with tapping into our team members or using systems or processes, changing up how we're managing our time, sometimes even shifting our business model. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here right now to write in that final column. And if there's anything that is feeling a little bit tricky for you in terms of like figuring out how am I going to do this, or Leanne, this isn't quite fitting with what you're talking about, please feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll try and take a minute to brainstorm or talk it through. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions popping in the chat. I know there's a lot of pieces that you're probably writing down here. We're going to keep going. And so the next page on your workbook, which I think should be page 7, says at the top, your 5 to 10 big goals for the year. And so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here now to really identify what are the 5 to 10 things, projects, goals, however you best want to conceptualize this, that you feel you need to be focusing on in your practice this year to really move the needle forward towards that 3-year vision that we created a few minutes ago. And again, I want to bring your attention back to the beginning of the session when I asked you, how you accomplished things, right? I want you to be thinking through that lens, right? When you are deciding on your goals for 2026. These are not just like the tasks or things that you'd like to accomplish. These are the things that if I do these things, they will make the most significant impact on leading me to my 3-year vision. Is this making sense to you? Yeah, okay. So page 7 on your in your workbook is where you're going to fill out a minimum of 5 things, maximum 10 things. If you are newer to doing strategic planning, I recommend staying closer to 5 because more is not better. Honestly, the better that I get at doing strategic planning like this, and the longer I'm doing it for, the less goals I have because they tend to be bigger goals. And so, having multiple really big goals is a lot to contend with. If you're feeling stuck or you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. Okay, we're going to move now into planning out the steps that you're going to need to take this year to reach your goals. Now, some of you may be really excited about this part, and others may be thinking, yep, I can do this. But there may be some of you that are kind of dreading this part. So this part is kind of like, that necessary evil in running a practice. And this is project planning. And if you are excited about this or feeling like you can do this pretty easily, that's great. But if you are kind of feeling some resistance or kind of dreading this, I want you to know that you do not have to be the one who does all of these steps, right? That's why we talk about doing things like delegating or hiring people, because yes, as the practice owner, you need to create the high level plan, but no, you do not have to do it all by yourself. And that's where having support to help you with the things that you're not wired to do comes in. Okay, so don't worry too much about it right now. What we're going to do is we're going to go to page 8 in your workbook through page 18. Don't worry, it's literally all the exact same page. There's just 10 copies of project planners. So in case you do have 10 goals or for the year, you've got a page for each goal. But really, the idea is that you take your goals for 2026 and you transfer one goal onto each project planning page. I hope that makes sense to you. And I put a screenshot of the page in the workbook on this slide, but I know it can be a little tricky to actually see. So hopefully you're seeing it in your workbook. So beginning on page 8, what you're going to do, you're going to create a project plan for each goal, right? So if you have 7 goals, you're going to create 7 project plans. If, one of your goals is to hit a certain revenue number with your practice, you might name that project revenue. And then target completion date might be December 31st, 2026. Now, under where it says goal, this is where you're going to be starting to think about SMART goals, right? SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So you might write by December 31st, 2026, I will have generated gross annual revenue of X. That would be your goal. And then the steps, right? If you need more than 8 steps, just transfer it to another document or use the second project planning page. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. You don't have to break it down into all of the little nitty gritty, teeny tiny details, right? Those things will end up being daily or weekly tasks, but what I want you to think about are the high level steps. So, for example, if I want to run an 8-week workshop, the steps might be create the course outline, create the title and generate content for the course, create the slides in the PowerPoint, create the handout for the course, determine the marketing strategy, then launch the course, then register 15 people for the course, right? That's like 6 or 7 steps, something like that. Okay, so it can be very high level, knowing that you're going to break down some of those steps any smaller. Is this making sense to everybody? Yeah, okay. So go ahead and start to do that for some of your goals. Now, I know for sure this isn't enough time to do the full project planning for all of your goals for 2026. But as long as you're getting the idea of how to break these down right now, that's the main purpose of this, knowing that you can come back to this and fill in those details, okay? The project planning is honestly the hardest part or the biggest part of all of this. And once you get through the project planning, then these next steps move along so much faster and they're pretty easy in comparison, right? So once you've completed the project planning, you've listed out those high level steps for all of your goals for 2026, for however many goals you have. And so the next part is to focus on setting your quarterly goals. And so your quarterly goals, like that's what we're going to do right now, are for Q1 2026, which means the months of January, February, and March of 2026. So from now until March of 2026, that's all we're going to focus on. And here's how you do it, right? You're not going to work on all of your projects and goals in the first quarter of 2026, hopefully, right? If you think you are, I want to encourage you to maybe put that idea to the side because often it's not going to work. There's just not enough time to do everything in one quarter. And honestly, I don't think it's really ideal or the best use of your time. So, what I'd like you to do right now is to order your projects or your goals, right? You're going to consider a few things. Number one is the order of your priorities. Which one is the most important? So, if you have 7 projects or goals, what are the top 3 that are going to have the biggest impact on moving things forward? Now, the other thing that I want you to consider is what I call dependency, because many times one project is dependent upon another. Okay, so like for example, if you're building an associate practice, and I use that as an example because it's often an easy one to think about for this, but whatever this example can really apply to whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to build an associate practice and you don't have any associates, and one of your goals is to bring on 4 associates, and another goal is to develop a comprehensive marketing strategy to fill your associates' practices, then you probably don't want to develop that full-scale marketing strategy when you don't have any associates because we don't know what their focuses are, right? Or what they're going to be wanting to work with, right? So you may need to bring on an associate or two first before you really start diving deep into that marketing strategy, right? So when you're prioritizing your goals, you will probably be able to say, well, I can't do this one until that one is started or that one is done, right? So I want you to consider your dependency. The other thing I want you to consider is what your first quarter looks like. What do you already have going on in your practice, as well as what's already going on in your personal life? What are you already committed to, and how much time or energy do you have between now and March 31st? So that what we're saying we're going to do in Q1 is realistic. Okay, so take a moment right now and choose which of those projects you're going to be working on in the first quarter. I also understand that, some projects actually take more than 1 quarter to complete, right? And that's okay. So you may need to do a few steps in Q1, another step in Q2, and a few more in Q3, right? The first thing, though, is to identify the projects that you're going to do all of or some of in the first quarter. Okay, so once you have that identified and you know if you're going to do the whole project in Q1 or just a part of it, is you're going to put it on your quarterly planning worksheet, right? So if you're going to just complete a few of the steps, then put the name of the project and the name of the steps. If you're going to do the whole project, put the name of that project or goal, right? So the idea here being that when you're finished your quarterly planning worksheet, you're going to have, I don't know, maybe between 5 and 15 things that you're going to be focused on in Q1. Please don't do more than 15 things. It could be a whole project, could be just a few steps, okay? Okay, and then once we've got those quarterly goals, then we're going to break it down monthly. Okay, so the next sheet in your workbook is your monthly planning worksheet. So that is on page 20. And so you're going to look at your quarterly plan for Q1, those things that you're want to work on in Q1. And I want you to decide right now which ones are top priority, the ones that are dependent on others and the ones that are the most important to get the ball rolling, right? So you might have 3 different projects or goals for in Q1. And what I want you to decide right now is what am I going to focus on in January, right? Am I going to do a few steps from everything? Am I going to just focus on one thing in January? There's probably not any like annual projects. Like if it's, my revenue is going to hit X by December 31st, you're probably not going to get that all done in January. Okay. So you really want to look at like what are the steps that you need to take in January. So you might pick 1 or 2 of those goals. on your quarterly sheet. And you might look at some of them and go, that actually doesn't make sense for me to start in January. I'm going to do that in February. And that's okay. Maybe you're thinking it needs to be done in March. So your monthly worksheet, you're going to write maybe 3 to 7 steps that you'll ideally be working on this month. That's just a general guideline. So do that right now for January. And then your next step from here, once you know what you're working on in January, is to bring those down into weekly goals so that you're able to now plan this out, as early as starting on Monday next week, right? So you're going to take your monthly worksheet on page 20 and you're going to look at page 21, right? So you're going to look at now, okay, what am I going to do next week that moves me towards completing my goals for uh, the month of January? And so I think we've got about 3-ish weeks left in the month. So you're going to look at your monthly goals and you're going to decide, what steps am I doing in what week of January? And this is really, how we take those great big goals that we have and break it down into small enough and actionable steps that help us actually get things done and, move us towards the goals that we're wanting to accomplish. And so after we're done here in a few minutes, you may want to take some time this week over the next day or so to really go through this workbook and finish things out, really flesh it out for 2026. Be thinking about, what you're going to be doing each month this quarter, what you need to be doing weekly, and you may even break things down into daily steps. This is what I need to do by Wednesday of next week. This is what I need to do on Thursday. That type of thing to really help yourself with moving forward with your goals. And I'll just take a moment here just to, if you haven't been on Build Your Private Practice website, you'll see we have 3 programs. I imagine everybody here already has a practice, so our initial program, Launch Your Practice, probably isn't applicable. But then we have Grow or Accelerate Your Practice. And Scale Your Practice is, I think, where many of you are, where you're building out your teams or you're adding in additional revenue streams to your practice. You'll notice on the slide that all of our pricing is in Canadian funds because that's where I am. I am in Canada. So if you are in the US, then that means this is an even better deal for you with the exchange rates. Um, all of our programs include things like onboarding. This is what we do. We help with planning and then we help with implementing the plans for your practice. And we don't have cookie cutter plans, so not everybody's going to do things the same way. We recognize that everyone's going to do things their own way. What they want for their practice can be very different. And so we meet you where you are and we work with what you're trying to do in your practice. And our Scale Your Practice program also includes private strategy sessions, and we've got annual planning, quarterly mastermind, all of those good things. So you can take a peek at that online. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now because I've been talking a whole lot. And I know you've all been like really busy, hopefully, in your workbooks. And I just wanted to spend our last couple of minutes together checking in to see, how this has been for you, to also check in to see if there are any questions. Hmm. Good question, Samantha. My personal favorite is ClickUp, but yes, Asana, some project management tools like that are really good. Inside our Scale Your Practice program, we actually have a custom template for ClickUp that we give everybody to help them with planning out things with their strategic plans, also delegating tasks for their teams. Does anyone else have thoughts on how they schedule out tasks? Anyone want to share? Did that answer your question, Samantha? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts before we're wrapping things up today?
I just like to thank you, Leanne. I think so much of um, this exercise is so often overlooked when we just
Mm,
get into the hustle bustle of the new year and don't take the time to do this thoughtful planning exercise. And, I think it also just pairs so well with what we practice and teach from a practice vital standpoint about the
mhm.
goal setting from a data standpoint is one component. That's the quantitative exercise to do that
Yeah.
pairs so nicely with this qualitative exercise. And really, as a practice leader, we need both. We need the qualitative quantitative combination to bring that holistic point of view as a leader for your practice. And I think it just, so often we're so deep in the numbers in the practice vital world with the folks that we're working with and collaborating with to help bring out those insights, but being able to pair that with those big picture goals that you on a personal level and at a practice level want to prioritize is such an important exercise. So just wanted to thank you for bringing that forward at this moment in time in January. Feels so relevant for us.
Oh, thank you for your kind words, Madeline. It's my pleasure to be here. And I'm seeing some people saying thank you in the chat here. You're so welcome. I'm so grateful that we had this time to spend together today. And I hope that each of you do take some time to finish out your plans in the workbook. And if there's anything that I can help you with, feel free to hop on our website, send me a message there. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you all again.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Bye.